The Republic of France is one of the most important countries in the European Union and plays a pivotal role on the world stage. The country is set to hold a very important presidential election beginning on April 10th, 2022, so I wanted to give you guys a quick explainer. Hey all you bitizens of the internet, welcome to Learnabit. Alright, so as a few of you know, I'm a grad student studying politics, and one of my favorite topics is comparative democracies. There are just so many fascinating systems of politics out there, and it's always good to have a little bit of information about what's going on in our shared world. So before we get into this, my usual elections video disclaimer. Take what I have to say with a grain of salt. I'm not an expert on French politics. I'm just a YouTuber and student making an introductory level video on how presidential politics in France work on a very basic level. This video is primarily for people not familiar with the topic. There are going to be a lot of major things that get left out due to time constraints, so very sorry in advance for that. Second, I don't speak French, and what little French I do know is pretty much limited to a tiny bit of French rap and the phrases that I've picked up from watching Frenchie on The Boys, so I'm going to struggle with some of the pronunciations here. But I hope you can forgive that, and the point is really to get the gist of what French political culture is like and how to watch this upcoming election. To do that, we'll be examining our usual three things: what political system France uses, what the major parties are in France and who leads those parties, and how this election is going so far. Got it? All right. So on a more serious note, I think it's also important to give fair warning that this election is a particularly heated and charged one. And so we're definitely going to go into at least a few places that are very uncomfortable. This is primarily made for an unfamiliar audience that might not otherwise pay close attention to this sort of thing. And I'm just going to try to just simply present what is going on as best I can. But again, I'm not an expert, so I will be leaving all my sources below, and I strongly encourage you to explore the topic for yourself. Okay, so the French Republic is classified as a unitary, semi-presidential republic. Now let's break that down and see how that compares to other countries we've studied previously. So in the Canada and US elections videos, we discussed federal systems, in which a country is divided into smaller divisions like states or provinces which internally govern themselves and are united under the federal government. However, federal systems are actually kind of rare. Most countries in the world today actually use the opposite of federalism. They're unitary states. In a unitary state like France, the entire country is governed directly by the national government. National, not federal, but of course with varying degrees of autonomy. Yes, unitary states do often have regions and regional governments. France itself actually has 18 distinct regions and several overseas territories. But in unitary states, these divisions are in general subservient to the policies of the national government, are in general changeable by the national government, and in general have only the powers their national governments give them. So note the asterisks there for future elections videos. Okay, so that's unitary. The country is governed as one single entity, not many. Next, semi-presidential. Now that sounds strange, but it's actually quite simple. It means France has both a president with significant powers who serves as the head of the state and is elected by popular vote, and it also has a prime minister who is appointed by the president and serves as the head of government. The president of France is very important to French politics and is often seen on the world stage as the, quote, leader of France. And so, unsurprisingly, many presidents of modern France are among the country's most iconic leaders, including Charles de Gaulle, François Mitterrand, Georges Pompidou, and Jacques Chirac. The current president is Emmanuel Macron, whose name I will now be pronouncing Emmanuel Macron because French pronunciation is hard. Finally, we have republic, or a system of representative democracy in which citizens elect representatives to a legislature to make laws on their behalf. French republicanism is a very distinctive political and philosophical system founded on the ideals of liberté, égalité, and fraternité, with deep roots that go all the way back to the Enlightenment and to the French Revolution of 1789. France is currently on its fifth republic, and France's republican traditions and commitment to the rights of man are enshrined in the French Constitution, the governing document of the Republic. Okay, so now let's talk about the rules of this election. French presidential elections use a unique two-round system to elect a president, who will serve for a term of 5 years. It's not quite like the US's primary system where voters choose the candidates for each major party before the general election. Instead, in the French system, the first round happening on April 10th, 2022, will pit the candidates of many different parties against one another. In order to appear on the ballot in the first round, a candidate needs to collect at least 500 sponsorships from locally and nationally elected politicians. These signatures must come from at least 30 different departments, which you can think of as very roughly like French counties, and may not have more than 10% of their sponsorships from a single department. Theoretically, if a candidate got more than 50% of the vote on the first round, they would automatically become president, but that has never happened before in French history, and as you're about to learn, probably won't happen anytime soon. Instead, the top 2 candidates from the first round advance to a second round, happening April 24th, 2022. This is to guarantee that the winner of the election gains over 50% of the vote, and is therefore, at least theoretically, the most acceptable of all the candidates in the race. Alright, so now let's talk a bit about who's running in this election. So here's what you have to know about the French party system right now. Putting it as delicately as I can, it's kind of a hot mess. Like absolute chaos. We're about to wade into a system in which, in percentage points, the first place candidate is currently only polling in the mid to high 20s. What's more, France's typical major parties may not necessarily reflect who is a major candidate in this election. And who are these candidates? Well, suffice it to say, there are a lot. Like a lot. At least 12 candidates have enough signatures to qualify for the first round. So, to simplify things, we're going to be focusing in on just the 5 major candidates and the most important trends that will be critical to this election, as well as how this election is going so far. To do that, we're going to look first to the left, then to the right, and finally to the Incumbent Center. So, very simply put, the French left is quite fractured right now and has been for quite some time. For example, take a look at the Socialist Party candidate, Anne Hidalgo, who, at least at first glance, should be a major candidate. Not only is she the standard bearer of what has historically been the main party of the French left, she's also the mayor of Paris and has the 3rd most sponsorships of any candidate in the race. Yet despite all that, she's only been averaging around 2% support in the polls. Yes, you heard that right, 2. Largely due to discontent with the presidency of François Hollande, the last socialist to hold the office, the party that was long the dominant force on the left has essentially collapsed, to the point that it had openly considered not running a candidate in this election. Earlier in the election cycle, when the left was firmly divided between at least 4 major candidates, a people's primary was held between the major candidates of the left to determine who the left as a bloc would back. Incidentally, the winner of that primary, Christian Taubira of French Guiana, has since dropped out, and the far left-wing candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon of the France Unbowed Party has since filled the void. Mélenchon previously came in a very close 4th place in the 2017 elections, and in recent weeks has jumped to 3rd place in the polls. A few major planks of his platform include drafting a new constitution and advocating for a new 6th republic, which would have a dramatically overhauled economic system and citizens' initiative mechanism, as well as lowering the pension age from 62 to 60. Alright, so that's how the left is doing. A long fractured and weakened movement, the mainstream center-left has effectively been overtaken by the further left and more populist voice of Mélenchon and France Unbowed. However, the Republicans, historically the main party of the center-right, also aren't doing great. Their candidate, Valérie Pécresse, did have somewhat of a decent shot for a moment. Describing herself as a blend of Margaret Thatcher and Angela Merkel, she has gotten by far the most signatures of any candidate and is the current president of the Île-de-France region, which includes Paris. And as recently as February, she was still in a narrow 3rd place. However, she was hit hard by a series of high-profile defections from her party back in February and has been accused of moving too far to the right to try to reclaim some of the far-right vote from more ideological candidates. So her support has essentially collapsed to the point where she is now in 5th place. However, the far right has seen markedly more success. France, like many countries in Europe, has seen a resurgent far right in recent years, and in the last election in 2017, Marine Le Pen of the far-right National Rally was one of the 2 candidates remaining in the second round. There are not 1, but 2 major far-right candidates in the race this time. Marine Le Pen is back yet again at the helm of the National Rally and is currently polling in second place. She has struggled to move the National Rally from what was once seen as an unacceptable and toxic political brand into the mainstream. And as we'll discuss later, in some ways this effort may have succeeded. Here's why that's so significant. The National Rally itself is a newly rebranded version of the vehemently anti-immigrant and ardently nationalist National Front Party founded by her father, Jean-Marie Le Pen, who as party leader was long accused of fomenting racism and was convicted of violating France's laws against Holocaust denial. The National Front, therefore, was a longtime pariah in French politics. Since Marie Le Pen took the helm, she has been desperately trying to rebrand. She did keep many of the hardline anti-immigration policies, but also more strongly advocated for a French exit of the European Union and from NATO. This time around, she has toned down certain pieces of her platform on exiting the EU, but her officially stated top priorities according to her manifesto are still, quote, stopping uncontrolled immigration and eradicating Islamist ideologies. Although in recent weeks she has pivoted more towards addressing the ballooning cost of living crisis in France in an effort to appeal to more mainstream right-wing voters. But Le Pen herself might not be the only thing pushing her and the National Rally further into the mainstream. Like I said, there is a second, even further right candidate in the race this time. Few could have predicted the trajectory of the Reconquête Party and Éric Zemmour, a very far-right firebrand and television pundit who has twice been convicted for incitement to racial or religious hatred. His forceful positions against Islam in France and immigration more generally, along with his stated mission to, quote, save our homeland, our civilization, our culture, have made him wildly popular within far-right circles. He has even gone as far as to promote the racist Great Replacement conspiracy theory, and has advocated for the deportation of up to 1 million people of North African descent. So, despite being even more hardline and outspoken than Le Pen during her first run, Zemmour was solidly in third place during much of the race, but has now slid down to fourth place as Le Pen is seen as more viable. Meanwhile, the frontrunner is the current president of France, Emmanuel Macron, the candidate of the centrist party, La République En Marche, and he does face a significant challenge. You see, not a single French president has been re-elected in 20 years. However, like I said, he is currently favored in the first and second round polls, so he might actually have a very good shot. Most pundits expected Macron to do very well as a centrist candidate whose party is staunchly pro-European integration, especially if the challenges are again Eurosceptics like Marine Le Pen in 2017. However, he has faced a number of major challenges as president, such as the pandemic, a poor European vaccine rollout program, and a very significant and prolonged protest movement known as the Yellow Vest protests. So the race has been a very competitive one for him. However, the recent outbreak of war in Ukraine has changed everything. Macron, long an advocate for a more integrated Europe, has benefited from his role as a leading voice in Europe and his efforts to help negotiate a ceasefire. The far-right candidates both have openly praised Russian President Vladimir Putin in the past. Zemmour, for example, is on record as saying he has dreamt of a French Putin and has defended him on numerous occasions. Le Pen has also historically been publicly very pro-Putin and anti-NATO, and recently had to destroy a planned campaign leaflet showing her shaking hands with Putin. Both have since publicly reversed their stances, but it has definitely tarnished their reputations. On left, Mélenchon has also had to contend with questions about his previous anti-NATO and anti-EU stances. So, where do we stand right now? Most likely, Macron and Le Pen will make it to the second round, but the other three major candidates also can't be discounted right now with the numbers so close. However, a Le Pen rematch is most likely to be the most challenging matchup for Macron as well. While he's polling ahead of her in the first and second rounds, he is currently only ahead by 6 percentage points in the second round, 53% to 47%. Perhaps in part because Zemmour ran so far to her right in this election, the stigma that surrounded Le Pen in the 2017 elections may have to some degree subsided in the minds of French voters, and she may have, at least in part, entered the mainstream. Plus, Macron now has a history of actions as president to defend, something he did not have back during their first matchup. So this really could be anyone's race at this point. And we'll just have to see what happens. All right, so hopefully you now know the basics about this upcoming French election and how France's political system works. If you're a French citizen, remember the first round of elections is Sunday, April 10th, and the second is Sunday, April 24th. Let me know if this format was interesting to you guys. I sort of love this thing, so let me know if you guys want me to horrifically oversimplify your country's political system next. And hey, you made it this far, so if you guys believed this video deserved a like, comment, or even a subscribe, I could really use that right now so I can finally get enough subscribers to earn my community tab. This has been Learnabit. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time.